What's up, fellas? In today's video, we're going to be taking a look back at the 2018 NBA draft. We've done this for the last couple of draft videos here, where we're looking back at some draft rankings on NBADraft.net and looking at how these draft classes were perceived at the time compared to what we now know about a lot of these NBA players. This is a really interesting class to look back on. It's the Trae Young, Luka Doncic draft class. And I certainly have some opinions about this one. But quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing to the channel. I upload twice a day, every single day on this channel. You can also leave a like rating on the video as well if you're enjoying it. Helps me out a ton, helps get the videos out to more people on YouTube. And if you want to hang out with me outside of these videos, there's a link tree in the description with every single social media that I have. You can check those out there. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. So the 2018 NBA draft, going into this one, there was one thing that I knew. I knew that Luka Doncic was the best player in the class, and that was about it. A lot of other things were definitely up in the air here, and it turned out to be a really, really interesting class, even just a few years into these guys' careers. Now, the order they have it here of Ayton, Bagley, Doncic, Jaren Jackson, Trae Young is basically how the top five went, with the exception of Doncic and Trae Young being flipped. Let's take a look at why they thought that not only Ayton, but Marvin Bagley, why those two guys were better prospects than Luka, who of course is the best player in the class at this point. Ayton is ranked as a 101 overall prospect, by the way. That's the highest we've seen. This is higher than Ben Simmons. This is higher than Markelle Fultz, higher than any prospect we've seen in either of the videos we've done to this point, 101. NBA comparison is Sean Kemp and David Robinson. So I'm sure it's going to talk about athleticism. It calls him a physical freak right here. It talks about, the skills that he has. Of course, defensive awareness needs to improve, and I think that's something that's continued for DeAndre Ayton at the NBA level. He's a good player, but not necessarily a great one at the moment. Certainly has upside still very early in his career. But I don't think that there's been any doubt that he's been outshined by guys like Trae Young and guys like Luka Doncic. And this felt weird at the time that he was going ahead of Luka. And it of course has been kind of validated that definitely felt weird at the time. Those comparisons are interesting though. Now let's go and look at Marvin Bagley though, because I wasn't a huge Marvin Bagley guy at the time of the draft. I made the case that, obviously he's a very good player, but that Wendell Porter Jr was, arguably just as good, and just the athleticism difference between the two made it look like Bagley was super dominant and that Carter wasn't a great athlete, which I don't think either of which were the case. They have Bagley ranked as a 99 overall player here. NBA comparison, Chris Bosh, because he's a lefty, and Amari Stoudemire because of the athleticism. NBA ready body, positional versatility, displays unusually smooth and fluid movements for his frame. Weaknesses, lacks the wingspan of other big men in this class and has to continue to fill out his frame with upper and lower body strength. My biggest issue with Marvin Bagley at the time of the draft was this. Duke had to play a zone because Marvin Bagley had to play a ton because he's a really good offensive player, but they had to play a zone because Marvin Bagley couldn't guard anybody. He couldn't guard anybody in a ball screen. And so that Duke team ended up playing a lot of zone because they could not guard. That was a huge question mark for me. And, some of the offensive stuff is translated. Sacramento seems convinced that Marvin Bagley should be playing 4. I think he's a 5 at the NBA level. Can still be a really good player. I think he still has a ton of potential, but never should have gone ahead of Luka in this class. And now we get to the Luka Doncic analysis here. So a 98 overall prospect coming out of Slovenia, or coming out of Real Madrid, excuse me. NBA comparison, Toni Kukoc and Hedo Turkoglu, because we have to make our, our international comparison here. I actually saw a couple of James Harden comparisons for Luka before the draft, and you could argue that is way more of an accurate, comparison than Toni Kukoc and Hedo Turkoglu. So talk about versatility. They talk about his IQ. They talk about the success he's had at a young age. And I've already done a video about this, about how the success that Luka had at a young age, for an international prospect is above and beyond anything that we'd ever seen. It's not even close. And I'm sure when we go to weaknesses, we're going to see something about lacking athleticism, right? Weaknesses. He can be considered a marginally average athlete by NBA standards. Not overly long, more of an average, actually. Why is this phrasing like this? First step is slow, even for European standards. So this was the concern about Luka, was we've been burned by international guys in the past, and even though he was the MVP of the league and he was a really, really good player, and already, at such a young age, people had concerns about the athleticism and whether or not any of this stuff would translate to the league. I was fully confident that Luka was the best player in this class, and he's been even better as a pro than I thought that he would be. And he just has other ways to make up for the lack of athleticism because, yeah, he might not be the greatest athlete, but he somehow manages to get around his defender every time down the floor anyway. And then this was a big sleeper guy for me, Jaren Jackson Jr., who I still love. I actually had these two guys ranked 1, 2 in this class. I had Luka 1 and Jaren Jackson 2 because of the versatility. I thought that Jaren Jackson was more of a Chris Bosh comparison than Marvin Bagley was. but like the Miami Heat version that plays a lot of defense and knocks down shots. They have an NBA comparison of Jermaine O'Neal. And I think that Jaren Jackson, as long as he gets healthy, he's going to be a really good defensive player and a guy that can shoot and space the floor and just a really unique prospect there at 4. And of course, now we get to Trae Young, who, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys know I'm not a huge Trae Young guy. He's a 97 overall prospect here. NBA comparison, Steph Curry, that's super annoying, and Mike Bibby. There's only one Steph Curry until proven otherwise. He's not Steph. The Mike Bibby thing is fine. I don't think I need to go over Trae Young too much here. I feel like I've already given my thoughts plenty on Young. But now let's look at, some guys later on down in the class, right? Because there are some really good players later on in this draft class. Michael Porter Jr. ranked number 7 here. SGA ranked number 10. Lonnie Walker's having a pretty nice year. Miles Bridges has been productive. Robert Williams has done some things. Anthony Simons, I still think he's really talented. Mitchell Robinson all the way down here at 26. Landry Shamet at 32. So some interesting players later in the class. The guy that I want to look at, though, there's 2 actually, is Michael Porter and SGA. Michael Porter, you can see, like, as a prospect, he's ranked as a 100 overall prospect, but he isn't ranked, as high as other people because he wasn't healthy in college, and I think he's turned out to be exactly what we thought he would be, a really high potential player that has some things to figure out. I don't love the KD comparison, but the Joe Johnson thing I actually do like a good amount, and it's all just going to depend on health for Michael Porter Jr. and whether or not he can stay on the floor, this season specifically as it relates to protocols and stuff, but just in general, that was always the concern, was the injury that he suffered in college, and he's going to be really, really good, has a ton of potential if he can stay healthy. And then SGA is probably the biggest surprise out of this class, was good at Kentucky, but people weren't really considering him to be like a super high ceiling player, and you could argue he's one of the best players coming out of this draft class now. NBA comparison, Ron Harper and DeJounte Murray, which is really, really interesting. I think one of the things that turned people off about SGA was he didn't have this huge high school reputation. He was just a 4-star recruit, but he's shown to be a really, really good NBA player. Kind of like almost has some Luka to his game in the fact that, he just kind of gets where he wants to on the floor despite not being a crazy good athlete. And it's super, super fun to watch him play. This was one of the surprises of the night. Jerome Robinson going all the way up to 11. His NBA career has not worked out, but I thought he was talented. I love DiVincenzo at the time. I thought, this ranking was fair for him. Colin Sexton's been really good for Cleveland as well. And then, as I said, once you kind of scroll down here, the biggest name really to look at is Mitchell Robinson, who's turned out to be a really, really good big in New York, one of the bigger steals of this class. They don't even have him graded here because they didn't see him at all in college. And it's like, how are you supposed to evaluate a guy that's just been working out for the draft up until the draft? Everybody knew he was talented, but they didn't know if stuff was going to translate. And a lot of the stuff you would have hoped would translate from Mitchell Robinson, defense, athleticism, did translate to this point. So he's been a really, really good player. I'm trying to remember. I don't think there's anybody down here that's turned out to be like a crazy good player. Javon Carter's fine. Devontae Graham is an interesting one to take a look at. Kind of struggling this year, but had a really good year last year. Ranked as a 88 overall prospect, but just an older guy is part of the issue here, is that, Devontae Graham is an older player. I've actually seen Devontae Graham play in this gym right here that is in this thumbnail. And he's turned out to be just a really, really good volume shooter. Again, having some issues this year, but a really, really good player. Outside of that, unless I'm completely blanking on someone, I don't think that there's anyone all that exciting here as we get closer down. Well, I guess Kendrick Nunn. What do they have to say about Kendrick Nunn? Not graded at all. They don't have no evaluation for Kendrick Nunn other than the fact that he's the 100th best player in this class. So ultimately, you can kind of see that obviously there's not going to be a ton of movement within this stuff, within the first couple years of these guys' careers. But it's just really interesting to look back and see that Luka was not the best player in the class. That Trae Young wasn't. Trae Young should definitely be higher than 5 here. SGA should be significantly higher. And someone like Michael Porter, by the time, this draft class is done, could be within the top 3 of this. You know what I mean? And, the jury's still out on Ayton and Bagley and Jaren Jackson to a certain extent. But this is a really, really good and talented class, again, as you get down to SGA and Colin Sexton and some other guys as well that are kind of doing some things. Mitchell Robinson within this class. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, as I said in the beginning, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. I upload twice a day, every day on this channel, as I said. So if you're looking for content like this or content similar to it, then check out the channel, leave a like rating on the videos, and check out those socials in the link tree in the description below. With all this thing said, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.